I've been a startup founder for almost 4 years now. I left a job at Google in 2021 during COVID and just went straight first into building startups.
For aspiring founder listening right now, what is one piece of advice you would give to them before they start?
Well, I think the first one I was going to think of is apply to an accelerator that gives you money pre-product or find a side income so you have time to figure things out.
Okay, so this is something personal. I don't know whether you are comfortable to answer that. What is your biggest fear for peak at this stage right now?
I really don't have a lot, to be honest. I feel like fears are just problems to solve.
What is the biggest misconception that you see that other people don't when it comes to coding with AI, or maybe just building apps with AI?
People think that vibe coding is just all about close your eyes, let AI send it, and just don't even try to learn the code at all. I think that's very misguided. I think a lot of reactions negatively to vibe coding are usually coming from people who are trying to gatekeep it because their own identity as an engineer is being challenged. How do you feel if all of a sudden what you spent 15 years feeling elite about, you can build all this stuff, right? Somebody can come in with no experience and just do it. So I think it's more of a cope than anything.
Will you walk me through the process? How do you actually vibe code peak in 3 hours? And what do you mean by rule of 6?
Yeah. So
welcome to our podcast. Today, we are joined by Jiang, co-founder of Peak, an AI-powered personal finance app for Gen Z, and Code with AI, a fast-growing workshop helping non-techies build real apps in 48 hours using AI. Cheryl also worked at Google for 6 years as a product marketing manager and was part of the founding team for products like Google Pay. In this conversation, dive deep into how she grew Peak to 10,000 plus users without spending big on ads. Sherry shares her user acquisition playbook from founder-led branding, building in public, and going viral on Twitter to leveraging niche TikTok creators to keep customer acquisition costs under $1. Sherry also runs Code with AI, where she teaches how to leverage AI to create apps and tech products with ease. A fun fact, Sherry herself built Peak's early prototype using AI in just 3 hours. So if you are building a consumer startup or just want to grow without paid ads, this one is for you. Let's get into it. Hey Sherry, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks admin for having me, and as always, really looking forward to catching up with you. It's been a while.
The last time we catch up was, a startup fucked up event last year?
Yeah.
The face-to-face one, right?
Yeah, that's gotta be a year ago? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, actually, around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Sherry is co-founder of and CEO of Peak, an AI-powered personal finance coach that helps busy professionals track their net worth, auto-categorise their spending and get personalised insights to reach their financial goals. Not just that, Sherry is actually also the co-founder of Code with AI. I believe some of you have already seen the news, Code with AI is everywhere. It's actually a hands-on workshop that teaches non-technical people to go from zero to building real apps in 48 hours. That's super cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here and sharing your story with our viewers today, Sherry. Yeah, appreciate that.
Of course.
Maybe before we start, right, could you share more about, your background, your founder story, journey of building Peak and also Code with AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a startup founder for almost 4 years now. I left a job at Google in 2021 during COVID and just went straight first into building startups. I met you admin through EF, where I incubated my first company, Bluejay, which was taking a bet in the Web3 space on creating real world use cases, whether it's stable coins or getting access to private investments. And from what I did on Bluejay, I learned that a lot of people don't necessarily need more access to places to invest or manage their money. They want more decision-making help on what to do with their finances in the first place. So that's what led me to Peak. And in a way, it's a return to the kind of work I've always loved, which is very hardcore consumer focused on behavioral science more than just pure finance, and just finding a way for us to not be our own worst enemy when it comes to the discipline of managing money, saving, and making sure we're living the best life that we can with money as a resource. And through my journey of building Peak, I learned how to code using AI, using tools like V0 and Cursor to more rapidly prototype features with our users. And that actually is what led me to starting this workshop middle of last year and growing it to hundreds of people who've now gone through our course. And some have actually started their own products and their own companies from there. So it's been such a fun journey. I mean, I feel blessed every single day that I have the opportunity to take risks and build something that hopefully does something positive for the world.
But there's so much to unpack. I mean, let's maybe wind back to the very beginning where you mentioned about taking risks and you left Google, after scaling Google Pay, all the way to 100 million users in India. So Google is like a dream job for many people by most standards, right? Like, I just want to know what's the final trigger moment that you decided to, let's hand over the resignation letter and then just go and build your own things. Like, what makes you quit your job, basically?
Yeah, I had a great time working at Google and was there for 6 years and had some of the most extraordinary opportunities to work on high growth products like Google Pay from the beginning. But I knew it was my time to leave when I reviewed this bullet point of achievements that I do every single quarter, right? What did I learn? What did I do? And that list just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller because we went from a more scrappy early stage team, got to work on a lot of stuff, launch in 3 days without legal approval and all that stuff, to feeling like I had the same bullet points over 3 months. And I felt like I was too young to feel stagnant in my career. And I felt like I was quite capped in what I could do in a corporate environment. The best move for me, I felt, was to just go off on my own and take an entrepreneurial risk. And I felt like I was in the position financially, emotionally, personally, where I can just go all in, even though I'd had no team, no idea right away, and just trust that I can figure something out with enough passion and conviction in myself to just do things and problem solve along the way.
And before that, were you already in Singapore or in the US? Back then during your Google days,
Yeah, I split my time between the US and Singapore. So initially between 2015 and 2018 was in California. And then 2018 was when I moved over to Singapore to work on payments for Asia. So I did 3 years in 3 years.
Right. I'm just curious because when you quit your job, why did you decide to, start your startup in Singapore, but not, in the US, Silicon Valley, the dream, all this stuff, right? Why Singapore?
I was already in Singapore. I think at the time it was hard to leave without knowing when you would come back. And I believe if you were to make any big changes in life, you shouldn't change too many variables at once. So it was already pretty dramatic leaving a corporate job and not having salary and jumping into startups. I felt like moving was going to be another challenge. Now, at the time as well, outside of the whole personal equation, my company was very much focused on how our technology would help for a region like Southeast Asia. So Bluejay was focused on Southeast Asia stablecoins and tokenization of Southeast Asia assets. So that's also why Singapore at that time. Now, obviously things have changed and we can definitely go into it, but it just made sense for me to start the company in Singapore, given where I was already at, as well as the vision and the focus area of my first company.
Got it. So basically you felt like you were not growing at Google back then after 6 years and, to lower your risk, you decided to focus on, Southeast Asian market and then based in Singapore. And you also mentioned that, you started Bluejay. So you joined EF, right? The incubator, which is the place where we met. And you met your ex-co-founder Raymond as well, to start Bluejay. And you mentioned you started as a stablecoin company, right? And I understand that you also moved to become a private credit origination platform.
Yes.
Before eventually pivoting to Peak, right? So it seems to me that Bluejay had 2 phases. Could you maybe share more about that and how do you actually pivot to Peak?
So phase 1 of Bluejay was creating a Southeast Asia stablecoin, starting with the Singapore dollar. So instead of USDC, it would be Blue SGD, which is pegged to the Singapore dollar. And I was very interested in the stablecoin space back then because my background was in payments, and I was very excited about the idea of a new age infrastructure where you don't have to deal with multi-day settlements. It's instantaneous. It doesn't have the same kind of cross-border friction that we all know the current financial system has. It's very siloed. So it was born out of my experience of seeing the old infrastructure with Google Pay and then seeing how that can be reinvented from ground up with stablecoins. Now, the reason why we decided to pivot from stablecoins into the tokenization piece was finding the initial use case for the SGD was challenging. And this is something that I think most people will say about the stablecoin space, that creating the mechanism to produce the stablecoin is not necessarily the most difficult part, but it's actually figuring out who needs this the most. We felt like the use case should be not just payments, because that's actually pretty hard to set up as a multi-sided market, but perhaps it should be access to certain capital markets that are more restrictive. And that's where we moved to looking at tokenizing private credit as a use case. So being able to access, let's say, high yield fixed income products originated in Asia that give you 10% plus in fixed returns as a diversification from equities, crypto, or other assets. The reason why the blockchain component is very interesting for that is it democratizes access for people who don't want to be putting $1 million minimum in something like this, right? Yeah. So instead, you can put in as low as $10,000 and be able to get access to that. It was something that made sense at the time because cyclically where we were in the market was high interest rates. So many people were departing some of the more high risk-on type of assets like crypto or tech equities and looking for something that is stable but still gives you something a little bit more interesting than 4% fixed deposit or 4% treasury yields. So that's how we evolved from Bluejay phase 1 into Bluejay phase 2 as almost like a use case for the stablecoin, and then building that out as almost like 2 product lines under the same umbrella.
Right. And so you moved to tokenizing the asset and then giving people access to private credit market, right? How did that end up, pivoting to Peak? Because you said that, I think back then, if I remember correctly, you partnered with validators.
Yes, correct.
To give the credit, private credit. The reason why I know because I was in talk with, I don't know, you or Raymond on the product that you guys were building. So how did that go from a private credit assets, tokenized assets to Peak?
So working on Bluejay at that stage gave us access to talking to our customers who are individual investors about how they think about their money. Because you can't really think about someone investing into private credit without thinking, okay, what is their long-term financial goal? What is their portfolio allocation? What is their personal finance decision making? So it became like, it was something that came up very naturally in conversation. And it became very clear to me when I was speaking to our customers for Bluejay that they liked using us because they liked the founding team. But when it came to how necessary our product was, like, are we solving a hair on fire essential problem for them? We just didn't pass the litmus test there. Like, if we went away to like the next day, our customers had many other options that they could look into. And that is not usually what you want to hear when you are a startup founder, because that means even if you have a market, your growth is capped, right? Then you're basically you're just another small business in a way, and you're competing against other players with not as much differentiation as you probably would want. So our growth was capped, and that's what allowed us, that's what led us to exploring, okay, what is a problem that it hasn't really been addressed? And when you look at the entire fintech space, a lot of it is occupied at the whole action layer, right? Where to invest, where to spend, what credit card to get. But very few people actually spend on the, how do we shape people's perceptions, decision-making process, accountability structures, so that when they make these decisions, they feel the best about it. So that became a more interesting problem for me to work on because nobody else was really doing it.
Right. So I remember just now you talk about the behavioral science principles that are used in Peak, right? So is that part of the core value proposition that you embedded in Peak product?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I can share a little bit about how we manifest it in the product.
Yeah. Please.
So number one is our product is designed to reduce stress for checking finances, which we've seen a lot of people say they create this avoidance cycle with finances because they open it up, they see big scary numbers where they spent more than they think they should, but it takes too much time to figure out what it is, and they feel dumb because there's all this jargon that they don't understand. So the design of the app has been built to be very friendly. So we have animation, we have pastel colors that reduce cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and the language of the AI that we have in Peak is very Gen Z coded. So it feels like you're talking to a friend, not like a judgmental parent or like a judgmental older person who's looking at you being like, get your act together. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is when we think about even things like, let's say spend categories, right? A lot of the apps out there will take I would say much more catch-all approach with categories. So they will say this is food category, and inside it can include groceries, restaurants, etc. This is transport category, and we lump in MRT, rideshare, all that. But we know that the behavior that leads to people leaking a lot of money is laziness, where you spend a lot on food delivery and then on rideshare when you could be doing cheaper options. So we learn to split out the categories to help people discern the kind of behaviors that are leading to perhaps outcomes where they're spending more money on things that they might not get the ROI out of. So we really study these behavioral patterns more than just take these finance categories at face value from like an open banking provider. This is just a very high level of how we look at behavior, but it's pretty much in everything that we do. So how do you present information in a way that makes somebody best understand it, and then later on have the motivation to actually make the habit changes that they want for their situation?
Well, there's so much stuff there. I didn't know that there's so much thought process that you put in, in building this product. But yeah, I mean, a lot of points that you shared kind of resonate with me because I'm using a free financial kind of like personal finance app. But then I realized the categories always are out of sync, and it's not really what I want. And for me to track, how much I spend on Pay Now, Pay Later to the credit card that I use, there's always a discrepancy there, and end up is going nowhere. And I'm just lazy to track at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that I have to put in effort to consolidate everything. So that kind of make me not want to do that because I'm gonna do like 1 to 2 hours just to do that. That shit, right? So
it creates an avoidance cycle when something doesn't make you feel good or something seems like a hassle, you don't end up doing it. And because you don't end up doing it, you end up not really building that awareness that you may need to actually make any kind of change. So we're trying to reduce that emotional friction as well as that behavioral friction to get started. And this probably wouldn't be a product that was possible to build a few years ago. But with LLMs, it's just become so much smarter. You can almost get to a step of nearly reading people's minds if you focus on the user profile, like fine-tuned enough. You can almost read their minds and know where the adjustments can be made before somebody even knows.
Right. Did you study that yourself? Like, how do you even know all these behavioral principles, the stuff that you just share? Like, where do you get this info?
Yeah, so I studied a lot of behavioral science back at Google. So a lot of what I did on payments was actually behavioral science experiments. So studied like what motivates people. There's this whole like progress mindset that people have where if you have a bunch of collectibles, it motivates you to finish a set. So we ran some loyalty programs and games. So studying how people think, especially about money, I mean, I've been doing it for years now. As it relates to personal finance, a bulk of it just comes from being a very active listener across all channels where you can get information. So I talk to tons of our users, ask them about what they do, how they spend, what are their habits they want to change. I spend a lot of time on TikTok as well because a lot of Gen Zs are openly sharing how exactly they spend their money. So it's basically free open source data, a data set. And then you hear people just talk about it online a lot. So you develop that intuition and that bank of knowledge, right, to understand. I mean, essentially, it's cognition, right? How people think, process information, behave, etc. Rinse, repeat.
So I recently listened to your latest podcast with Greg Eisenberg, right? Who is a famous guy, constantly talks about startup ideas and bootstrapping and all this. And one thing I learned from that is that you share that P was built through vibe coding, a prototype just in 3 hours, and then followed by user testing with a rule of 6 methodology. Okay, could you walk me through the process? How do you actually vibe code Peak in like 3 hours, and what do you mean by rule of 6?
Yeah. So I used v0.dev and Cursor to create a minimally viable test for Peak. And I like to use the word minimally viable test because it means like what's the minimal amount you need in the product to get useful feedback from users. What I wanted to know is, do people find that an AI-driven personal finance app help them feel like they can get to decisions faster and feel better about money? And it's impossible to test that just through qualitative research without showing them something. Because of course people are like, okay, AI product sounds interesting, but like, I don't know what the hell that looks like, right? Yeah. So that's where the vibe coding came into play. So what I did was I created a rough PRD like any product manager would of what this looks like. Okay, there's a dashboard at the top of your spend and investments, but what's different is we have a bunch of templates where it's like seeded AI questions to AI. Where can I save more this month? How does my spending compare to my peers? So I had a bunch of these templates created, which are seeded prompts. And then I had actual Claude connected to it to handle the AI question and answer. And it was text-based to start, nothing that we have today, which is calling different tools for charts, different UI elements that look way better than my first stab. But that was good enough for me to go to users and start getting reactions from them to collect data. And even with the scrappy prototype that I made in just a couple of hours, I was able to get reactions coming from people where they're like, oh, this AI really feels like it's trying to understand me. I feel like this single purpose conversation is less overwhelming than a bunch of numbers on a dashboard for my bank app. So I started to pull out some of those insights I learned from people. And it was easier to also hear their complaints with the existing tool sets when they got to see what the alternative could be. And after going back and forth and testing this with a few users, decided that, okay, this is enough to actually go and try to build something more robust with real data coming in versus seeded data, with more sophisticated prompting to answer different questions, which became what Peak is today.
Oh wait, so it was just a mock data the first time that you showed it. It's not even the real data.
Yeah, it was just mock data. I wanted to simplify things, right? Because you could try to connect it to banks and everything, but that's not what I was testing for. So this is the whole concept of minimally viable test, right? I basically scoped it because I didn't think that the user needed to have exactly their real-time data to answer the question of whether or not they like the AI interaction. So I faked the data to be close enough to what they would have. I mean, I narrowed down the kind of users we were talking to. So they're like, early 20s. Like, I kind of know what people are spending their money on. So it didn't feel unrealistic versus like spend data for somebody who's 45 with 2 kids, right? That's very different spend data. So I learned where to cut some corners so I can be able to get something out there to get feedback.
Okay. And what about the rule of 6?
So I use this because there was an amazing UX researcher that I respected back at Google, who I worked with a lot of these behavior experiments for GPay and all these other emerging market products. His name was Afsif, and he taught me something called a rule of 6, meaning how many people do you have to talk to in depth, right? For an early stage question, how many people do you need to talk in depth with before you start discerning some patterns? If you talk to only 3 people, then your sample seems very small. But if you talk to 20 people, that's a lot of time, right? So what's that middle ground? And he had done research for 2 decades, right? And he basically shared, from my experience, you roughly get to 6 people. And you can start to see repetition of patterns, and you start to get enough information to be able to either build the product to the next step and test the next round, or know that your direction needs to change, right? Maybe there's not enough here for a product that is viable. So I use that rule of 6 with my vibe coded test, where the first few users I talked to was only 6 of them. Obviously, I ended up talking to more and more as I iterated the product. But when you start out, you don't need to boil the ocean and talk to like a ton of people. This is very counter EF, because I remember when we went through EF, they're like, talk to as many users as possible. You're not talking to enough users. You're not talking to enough users. And like, you listen to that because, I mean, if you've never built a startup, you just take it at face value. But I don't think it's always true. Like, sometimes your time is better spent building the product and getting it to the next step than it is to like spend hours talking to more people telling you the same thing.
But this is quite intuitive, because a lot of founders, including me, I thought that, we have to talk to, 30 to even 50 potential ICP before we decide whether it's worth building something or just go build the product. So from your experience or your insight, it seems that talking to 6 people, the 6 right people is enough already to get feedback or notice some pattern and then start building and iterating, right?
Yes. So that is what I noticed. Now, I will say there are some caveats.
Okay.
If you are building in an industry where you are new and you are unfamiliar, and perhaps your definition of who an ICP is very broad because you're still searching, you might want to talk to more than 6 people. You have to use your common sense here, right? In my case, I had at that point already talked to so many people about managing money that I had an intuition for it. So I could follow that. If you feel like you hit 6 people and you don't feel like you got enough information, I mean, you don't need to follow it like it's the Bible, right? Use your judgment. But for most of the time, I'd say people should try to build in something that they have an intuition for already. So that's where the rule of 6 applies. But if you're just like learning about a brand, if I was building in maritime, right, I probably should talk to more than 6 people because I'm still like understanding how the space works. Yeah.
So domain expertise plus intuition are the keys here.
Correct. Yeah.
And when you first built Peak's MVP, what was the single feature that you wanted to ship or focus on? Like, how do you even convince yourself that to cut other non-important features out?
I think we could have done a better job, to be honest, by cutting even more features than what we had. But we knew that we needed to have some kind of dashboard still, because even though we don't want to be a dashboard first product, users still need to have some mental grounding for what their numbers look like. If you want to go into an AI chat, let's say in the non-peak world, go to ChatGPT, well, you still need to know how much you spent, what categories you spent on, what you spent last month versus this month. So we still have a very MVP dashboard of your basic metrics there on spend as well as your balances across your account. And then the core piece that we focused on, which is the secret sauce of Peak, is the check-ins, which is essentially the scoped out AI workflows that you go through and ask certain questions. How do I save 10% more this month? How do I increase my savings to 20K over the next 18 months for my wedding, right? These are like the more multifaceted, complex questions that people ask related to money, using AI in our app to guide you through each step of the process. We needed to make sure that this part worked well, and that's what I tested for in the whole vibe coding prototype period as well, because that's something that is novel, that is very different than what people are used to. So we needed to have the hygiene stuff. So grounding metrics on the dashboard plus our secret sauce feature, which is the AI check-ins. I think for other features, we did bring them into the product, which was more like tasks that you can add. But to be honest, if you were to ask me, I probably wouldn't have scoped that for the launch looking back. But sometimes you end up getting too excited about the promise of features before you actually launch them, and see that there might be too many features for them to try, and you need to really focus on one core path for people.
Right. I remember during the EF days, one of the sessions, they taught us how to ask the right questions by following the mom's test book. So were there any specific questions that you asked during your user interview, during your demo to show them and just to get the ground truth instead of the fake truth, right? Were there any questions that you asked?
What I love to ask people, and this is the case across any product that you're building, is I love to ask people, what is your workflow today? Like, what are you doing to manage your finances today? How often do you do it? Are you like opening up your apps? Are you copy pasting into Google Docs? Are you doing it in Excel? What analysis are you doing or not doing? How long does it take you? What time of the day are you doing it? So I get like the complete, like what I call like world building pre-product, right? Like, what does their world look like in detail before our product comes in? So that's one question I love to ask. A very mom's test space, right? There's no mention of what our product is. The other question I love to ask is about how they last felt some negative emotion about the experience of managing finances in the case. And I use the term frustrated. You can choose different emotions, right? You can say like angry, disappointed, like whatever. But people usually will not pay for or use a product that is just a nice to have. They're usually getting a product if it's solving some intense negative emotion that exists that comes at enough tough frequency for them to want to solve, right? And if you're frustrated about your finances multiple times a month, then there's something there to help me figure out, okay, what exactly is leading to it? Is it the lack of control and visibility? Is it feeling like that you don't have the knowledge to be able to make the decision? Is it you feeling like you are lazy and procrastinating when you don't want to, but you do it anyways? So I ask these questions because this is effectively the job to be done that we should be focusing on. It's not just about, okay, there's a feature and it does this thing, but it's about what emotion are we alleviating for the user? And then what is the new world that we're going to be building with Peak? What does that workflow now look like if you're, not doing the Sunday check 3 hours accounting spreadsheet, copy paste, right, type of world? And is that world that we're creating for Peak 10x better than what you had before and 10x like relieving the negative emotions that you felt?
Interesting. And let's say if I'm the user, I want to use Peak and I need to integrate with my bank accounts and credit card accounts. Now, in Southeast Asia, at least from my experience last time building Stack, where we was the financial API for SME lenders, we realized that aggregating bank, and just the bank accounts alone are super, super tough and difficult and tricky for us.
Yeah.
My question is, it's so hard to integrate banks. How do you even integrate, other brokerages, investment platforms, crypto data? Like, how do you even do that?
It's very difficult. And we tried to do that for Singapore last year for Peak and ultimately decided to focus on the US market first instead. Because Plaid and other open banking third-party services have it just out of the box. It's not necessarily impossible to build. It is just about time. And we had to build a lot of our own bespoke integrations, which I'm sure you understand, right? And our team was just stretched, right? If you're trying to test integrations, maintain them, things break, etc., you don't have time to think about creating the UI with good taste and thinking about, okay, what does an AI native experience look like? I mean, that is the fun stuff that we get to focus on now because we don't have to worry about infra. So to answer your question, it's very difficult. And I hope one day there is either a solution we can plug into that we can build easily or another service that comes into the market that we can leverage for Peak. Because then we can do this for Singapore. But right now it's just very difficult because a small team can't really focus on multiple battlefronts, right? You gotta pick one and just execute it very, very well.
I mean, we face the same problem as well. And I thought ACME, they are solving this, but I don't know whether they have any integration. No. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some efforts here and there, but none scaled out or commercially viable enough for us to plug into out of the box.
Got it. Oh, cool. Now, you mentioned you expanded you focus now on the US side of thing. Let's talk about product distribution and user acquisition, because you are essentially building a B2C consumer app, right, with Peak.
Yes.
How do you acquire users at scale? Do you use ads? Do you use organic reach? Like how do you get user? How do you get user to know you first? And how do you get user to use a product?
So right now, I think is the golden age of B2C because A, vibe coding has made it easier for people to get things started. And then B, all of these new platforms like TikTok, Instagram have presented a marketing media arbitrage that has not existed since Facebook ads was way, way, way cheaper pre-COVID. So all of the scary things that make VCs not want to invest in B2C has actually been going away quite a bit because it was previously very expensive and also very hard to distribute B2C. So how have we gone about tackling it for Peak? So I would say for Peak, it's been in 2 phases and we're in phase 1.5, I would say in a way. So phase 1 was founder-led branding, which I think is kind of a theme nowadays where a lot of founders are going instead of product first, they're going brand first, personal brand first, and then marketing to their audience. And I had a bit of experience doing that on LinkedIn and Twitter for the last couple of years. And so the first initial people that came to use Peak were just following my build and public journey on Twitter. So I was posting every single day from the very beginning, even when the product was very buggy and crappy, right? This is what I'm working on. This is what we're doing. And here's what we're iterating every single day. And I think that built a lot of trust with people where they felt like they could go and try the product. But also secondly, I just wrote enough volume of stuff that a few of them did happen to go viral. So that's the key with any organic social is you just pump out enough stuff. You give yourself the power lock ability to catch posts that get a couple 100K, couple million, and compound from there. So we had a few posts that went viral on Twitter, and then I used that to build momentum for Product Hunt, which we then became #1 for the day. And that created a lot more press. And to be honest, I think Greg probably came across what we were doing because we became #1 on Product Hunt, right? So it was just putting yourself out there, building that basic awareness. People might not necessarily even know exactly what Peak does, but they're like, hey, I keep seeing this person Sherry who's saying she's building the next biggest personal finance app. Maybe there's something there. So that was phase 1. Now, founder-led branding for B2C probably cannot carry you to your first 100,000 users. It can carry you to your first 10,000. I think for your first 100,000 or million, right, depending on how big your base is going to be, needs to come from scaled channels. Now, the reason why we didn't go Facebook and Snapchat ads and all that is the cost per downloads are just insane for an early stage startup. I mean, you should be seeing 10, 20, $30, right?
For one download.
Yeah, for one download.
Wow.
And that's not sustainable, right? I mean, then you pretty much need to follow the playbook of 2017 B2C apps, which is raise a ton of money for marketing, spend a lot of money for marketing, and get some users, right? And that's not very sustainable. So with short form, what it's allowed people to do is reach customers at a huge viral scale at low cost per downloads, sometimes even as low as a couple tens of cents. And the reason why this works is, A, there's so much, there's a lot of fragmentation and information asymmetry in this space right now. So you can kind of take advantage of that in a way. So what that means is you can still find a lot of creators that you work with that are a lot, I would say, more cost effective than going to do meta ads, right? And there's a lot less information around performance benchmarks and things like that. I think that's going to change, but I think that's one part of it. The second thing is your targeting just becomes way better if you find niche creators that have really specific audiences that work for your product. So the kind of creators that we partner with for Peak are young Gen Z, usually women that live in big cities that are openly sharing their finances already. They're already showing how much they spend, how much they save, how they split their paycheck, all that stuff. Bringing Peak into their content is very natural. It feels like it's educational. And their audience is already primed. So your conversion rates are going to be much higher when you find pockets of all these types of creators than it is to run an ad where it's like you don't exactly know who's going to be seeing it. Maybe it's some random person who has absolutely no interest in managing their money. But if someone's following a personal finance creator, chances are they are looking to find a solution here. So yeah. And then I think the third part of this strategy that works is you can go viral very quickly. You don't have to have a ton of followers, and you can jack up your views to millions in just about a month if you hit the algorithm the right way. So a lot of consumer apps have used this. We're still early, but some examples like Jenny AI has hit like a 8-figure in ARR. Kali, which is using AI to disrupt the fitness industry, and incumbents like MyFitnessPal, they make 30 million ARR in just like 18 months. So there's this playbook that's emerging, and I think anybody who wants to build consumer should find a way to utilize it. Well, there's still this arbitrage for the next, I think, 2 years at least.
Wow. Okay. I'm still trying to digest what you say, right? So basically founder-led branding for phase one.
Yeah.
And you've already got until 10,000 plus users, right, for Peak. And now you're already scaled using TikTok influencer marketing. Yes. And how do you find these creators? Because like they're everywhere, right, on TikTok. Yeah.
I mean, this is where there's just good old grinding and brain rotting and finding people. I have a couple accounts that have the algo warmed up to find content that is in this niche, so personal finance. I scroll through, I find creators, I put down a list of them, and then I email them, and rinse and repeat. Sometimes I supplement this with some creators analytics tools. I use one called Modash, which helps you with similarity scoring. So what you can do is you can put in the handle of, let's say, a finance creator I like, and it will spit out, here's some 10 similar profiles that you can look at. And then I go look at their conversion rates, their metrics, all of that, and just see if it's a good fit. I look at their content as well to be like, can I imagine them creating content around Peak? And then I reach out. So it's a grind. I mean, I've probably reached out to hundreds of creators, and you have to know that a lot of them won't respond to you. Some of them won't be in the price range. Yes. So it's just a grind.
Are you targeting the small creators? I mean, like from 10,000 plus followers all the way to 100,000 plus followers?
Yeah, that is usually the sweet spot. So basically the way I look at it is I want to make sure I aim for an estimated cost per download of under $1.
Under $1, okay.
Yeah, under $1. Ideally 50 cents, but again, it's not always easy to manage to exactly that. And the way that the pricing works is you have almost a per video cost, and you pay it over a retainer for a month. So let's say some creators, it's like $50 a video, some 30, some 100, depending on their follower size and the views of their video. Now I have to basically estimate how many downloads I think this creator can drive. And obviously, if you're much smaller, you drive fewer. If you're much bigger, you drive more. But the bigger creators will sometimes have a much higher cost per video that is beyond the cost per download I'm willing to pay. So I look within this sweet spot. And oftentimes what I like is working with the promising but smaller creators that are in the 10 to 20,000 range, but they're growing super, super fast. It's almost like a price to earnings ratio for a stock, right? And you can look at growth rate actually on some of these tools. So if you work with someone whose account is growing 20% month over month, 30% month over month, then it's a great arbitrage because basically you're getting in at a time where there's fewer deals they'll be working with. The pricing's usually a little bit more favorable, but they're still likely to churn out bangers, right? That can do well for your company. So I look for a lot of those like promising high growth creators within my niche.
Okay.
It's like talent acquisition, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like when the K-pop, agencies go out and look for like new talent for their guy groups and go scroll TikTok and stuff. That's pretty much what I do. I'm like an A&R department. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have to keep finding creators, or you already have a pool of creators that are working with you nowadays, or do you have to keep finding new creators?
Keep finding. Because it's a funnel. Basically, if you onboard, let's say 7 creators to trial, chances are only 1 to 2 are going to work out, right? Okay. And it's not, again, personal. It's like audience match. It's like content style. And, if, 5 of them don't aren't a good fit, then you have to go out and find more and more. So it's a trial and error process, and you don't really know until they start creating content for you.
Interesting. I mean, one thing I suddenly thought of is in my previous influencer marketing agency, I don't know whether you plan to do that, but actually how we did back then is when we ran campaign for our clients, we have, let's say 10 KOLs for them. And the winning KOL that has the highest engagement, we will usually use that to run ads and to scale that further to get better. Do you also do the same, something similar?
It's just organic at the moment. So the way I see it is the reason why we're at phase 1.5 is we're still figuring out what playbook works the best for us. Okay. So we're still testing like vastly different like content frameworks. So once we get a formula down of like, these are the 10 that just slap every single time, you just vary it a little bit. I think that's when you can use ad boosts to scale. Otherwise, you're just lighting money on fire, right? If you're like, still at the discovery process. So we're still at the discovery process with the types of creators, the content format, and all of that. So once we have that nailed down a bit more, then I think scaling out can make sense.
Right. And I understand that Peak right now is free for users in the US. But how do you plan to monetize it in the future?
We plan to monetize it via subscriptions, just like we did for the very first version for Peak in Singapore, which is actually a paid product. We decided not to have a paywall initially because what's more important for me right now is just to land grab. If there's not really a top AI personal finance app today that is in the minds of our audience, we want to be like buzzing through people's heads as like a first step, right? Before others come in and try to build around this. Okay. I think once you have that type of zeitgeist-like relevance, I think it's easier to monetize. So again, my point of view, some people might disagree, but I think it's more important to be like, you're the first to be top of mind. Yeah. Otherwise, your marketing costs are going to be much higher in the future if you have competition that has already leapt and gotten more awareness than you amongst your audience.
Makes sense. Yeah, love it. I see that you have been building in public. You mentioned you have been building in public like for the past few years, right? And apparently a lot of founders out there, from what I understand, they are still not building in public yet. Yeah, what is your view on, do you think building in public right at this stage is very important for most founders out there, or it's a optional thing for them to do?
I mean, everything is optional, but I would say that building in public, like to me, like I think the risk of somebody copying what we do, the risk of someone being like, oh, your app is still buggy, work in progress, I think is relatively low, right? If, like, trust me, like I've been posting about everything that we're doing with Peak. I have not seen copycats, right? We will probably get copycats once we hit like a certain threshold. Like Callie and I started to get copycats once they hit a few million in ARR. And at that point, like if you try to copy them, like you're kind of screwed because they're already so far ahead of you. So like, I don't think I'm worried about copycats. And if anything, like I should believe in the IP of my team and the way we think about it, that like we'll always be 6 months ahead if somebody tries. So I'm not worried about that. I think the part around like product needs work and everything. Well, the great thing is the build in public platforms like Twitter are like very forgiving for those kind of things. And I found that sharing, like recently I shared, hey, we got a 1-star review on the App Store because we had an accessibility issue where like a red screen popped up. We had people who are familiar with Expo, which is what we use for mobile app development, actually chime in to give a little bit of feedback around, hey, maybe you want to look at the toggles in your setting around motion, right? So yes, I'm sharing some warts about the product out into the universe, but the benefit of like this accelerated learning process is just so much more to me. And I still think we're small enough where like we can make more mistakes in public. I don't think when you're at the stage of Google or a big company, like you have that luxury still. Like I totally get it. Like
you have a PR issue, right?
You have a PR issue, right? But right now, Peak is still the underdog. And I think people are way more forgiving of the underdog, and nobody really cares, right? If anything fails spectacularly, you're not big enough for it to be a PR nightmare. You're more likely to get more value out of feedback. So I feel like build in public has been extremely beneficial to us. Now, I know some cases where build in public could be something that people don't want to do. So if you're working on, let's say, enterprise, right? And there's a lot of like super proprietary stuff that you can't really share or whatever. And your audience is not like, you're not going to get any benefit from like the audience in the platform you're looking at. Like maybe, right? You don't want to invest time there because you have 10,000 other things that you could be doing. But I think most people shy away from build in public, not because they're doing proprietary enterprise type of work. They're shying away from it because they don't want to put themselves out there because it's scary and it's a lot of work to put yourself out there constantly. And you're so afraid of getting judged. You like want your first unveiling of your product out to the world to be so perfect and everything. But I think I've been able to get past that because I've failed in public so many times. And I'm still here. So I don't really care if I fail in public again. You know, it's like, it's not too bad. Like it's,
your pain tolerance is much higher now.
Yeah. Just emotional resilience, pain tolerance. Like I just don't care as much. Like I'm just trying to do the best I can for our users. And that's all that matters.
Okay. Let's talk something deeper, right? So what's the toughest moment in your Peak's journey? You know, maybe some product flop or team decision, you know, or some near-death experience that you haven't talked about publicly before? Is there any? Or you share everything public already?
I share most things publicly. I think probably one of the, again, I don't think this is a huge challenge, but it's just something that it took a little bit of, I would say, reorienting the way I think to process it. So when we went from Bluejay to Peak as a pivot, we actually started our cap table over. Like we started a brand new company, and we also, it's not under Bluejay. So we actually started a new company, and we wanted to start afresh as well to bring in investors that align with what we're doing. But that also meant we basically returned over like $500,000 of capital to our old investors. So there was a period in time where we basically didn't have much money. We were like, I hope we can make payroll. And it was a difficult decision because legally you can keep the money, right? When you raise seed fund, whatever. But I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. And I also wanted to set things off right. But there was definitely some like stress, I would say, where I had never in my time, or it had been many years since I operated with like low runway, or like had times where financially, like we just didn't have the money all the time. And even to this day, right? I mean, we just have funding from Iterative, and then we have some investors that have continued from Bluejay to Peak, but it's the lowest amount of money I've ever had, right? I mean, Bluejay was interesting because we had a lot of money, and then direction was kind of hard to figure out. We just like have the lowest runway we've had, right? I mean, I think we have less than a year. We have like 8 months of runway. You know, it's a time where also raising for B2C fundraising is hard. And that's because you're either pre-product and you're aligned on thesis, which is it's probably less than 1% of the products out there, or you're already at like 100,000 in downloads, right?
Yeah.
So we're in this like awkward in between where it's like we have traction, we're 10,000, but we're still like pre-scale, right? And that's what we're working towards. So it's a fine reality, but it's something I perfectly know that I'm just 100% depending on my ability to execute and grow the product without the space cushion that I had with Bluejay. We're like, oh, we can try this, try that. So yeah, I think that's something I've had to mentally be comfortable with, that like, I don't need to keep solving for runway. Let's just solve for traction, like go all in. I'm a founder. I got to take this gamble and not focus my time on fundraising as much and focus on just executing and just know that things will work out.
Wow, actually, yeah, it is something new to me. Yeah, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, I said something new. Yeah.
Wow, you have 8 months of runway. So are you raising like in the next few months? Or right now you're just solely focusing on getting traction first before you start your fundraise?
Focusing on traction before fundraise.
Okay.
We are taking some like angels or small funds here and there, which is great. That just goes into marketing spend. But in terms of like a big round, right? Oh, we're raising like anything near like what we do with Bluejay. I mean, that's not the focus area right now. Like we just have to ruthlessly execute well.
Understand.
Your best pitch is your traction.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So this is something personal. I don't know whether you are comfortable to answer that. Like, what is your biggest fear for peak at this stage right now?
I really don't have a lot, to be honest. I feel like fears are just problems to solve, right? I feel like I've taken the emotion out of a lot of things in the founder. So like fear of running out,
so zen,
right?
Yeah, okay.
It's like fear of running out of money is just okay. Well, it's a problem to solve. Let's get traction as quick as possible and then be able to fundraise. It's just a problem to solve, right? If funding's a challenge, right? Then then we'll have to like figure out other income sources, right? Which like I obviously have built that out for myself, knowing that B2C can take some time. So to me, I think I've just tried to take fear out of the equation. They're just problems that you have to solve. But it caught me crazy or whatever. I think this is the first time in my 4-year startup journey where I am so convinced that what we're doing is inevitable. It's just whether or not the timing is the right timing, right? Is it end of this year? Is it beginning of, it's kind of like how the Notion guys felt like their like Wiki, Google Drive, like hard to explain product was going to be what people wanted, but they spent years trying to get to the point where people realized they wanted Notion. I think that's how I feel. So as long as like I know emotionally, financially, like I have the runway to keep working on this, like I don't fear not getting there eventually. The market just has to wake up and, realize that this is what they needed all along, right? And we'll figure it out.
Cool. Wow. Maybe one more question about building Peak, because you mentioned about a few mistakes that you make. I mean, one is the pivot from Bluejay to Peak. But I haven't really heard about, the biggest mistake that you make when building Peak. Is there like a biggest mistake that you make when building Peak, be it for the product or stuff like that?
I think probably the biggest one was spending 9 months building the wrong product last year, like focusing on Singapore, doing a desktop and LLM wrapper on top. Like, I just don't think that was the right product. Now, the issue is like a lot of these things I say are like hindsight, right? I mean, in the moment, you don't know these things and you develop the intuition to do the right thing because you were doing the wrong thing, right? Like, how do you know what the right is until you kind of go through the motions? Now, so I don't think I can fault myself for like trying something, but maybe I could have spent less time doing it. I could have like thought about changing directions earlier.
Wait, how is the Peaks now different from Peak in Singapore? Is there 2 different products?
It's a completely different product.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Peak in the US is completely AI native, not just a wrapper on top of a dashboard. It's a mobile app. It's a completely different stack, right? It's not connected. So I think I could have figured out the pivot a little bit earlier. So now I just learned to trust my gut more when it comes to making decisions. I might have mentioned this during the fuck ups panel as well, is just learn to trust yourself and use intuition. Like you don't have to wait until you have 3 weeks of confidence about how something's going before you make a decision. If you feel it already, just do it. Like, you're still small enough you can reverse these decisions if it turns out incorrect. But most of the time I've followed my gut and changed directions, I have not been wrong for the most part.
Does that mean when you pivoted to the US, you have to build the product from scratch, from ground up? Okay.
Yeah.
And then this time vibe coding or?
Yeah, the app is all, we use AI assisted coding for it. I mean, by vibe
Were
coding,
you the
it
one
doesn't.
building that?
So I only built the prototype.
Yeah. Okay.
The product that is launched is built by Jeff and team.
But I think enough about P, right? I mean, Code of AI, I'm quite interested in what you are doing now with Code of AI, because apparently right now a lot of people want to use AI to build something for themselves. But also I heard the opposite side of thing, which is a lot of people online also talk about that vibe coding is a hype. People who vibe code, they don't know the full scale of software engineering. The product might flop, in real life. Also of this, like, what is the biggest misconception that you see that other people don't when it comes to coding with AI, or maybe just building apps with AI?
I think people take what I call a straw man argument to say vibe coding is shit or doesn't work. Straw man argument basically means you take the worst version of something and you bash it, right? You're like, oh, well, in vibe coding, you can accidentally leak your keys and there's security issues. Oh, well, yeah, if a bunch of people are like just using AI to code, but don't even try to look at the code, like it's going to be shit. Well, yeah, of course it is, right? But that's not all versions of vibe coding. So there are some platforms that you can use for vibe coding, like Vercel, that has v0.dev, that works very, very carefully to make sure that your API keys are not added into the code. And if you try to do it, they're not going to put it in there. They're going to direct you to adding it into your environment variable. So if anyone's a coder, you know that like your keys are supposed to be in a separate environment file, whether you're using Cursor or v0. So you can use that key if you want to call Gemini or call like a backend service. But if you push it to GitHub, you won't accidentally show your key to other people. So that's one argument against vibe coding that I've seen. But again, it's like there are things in place that just require some education as well as safeguards on the tool sets to prevent somebody who's newer from doing something like that. I think the other misconception is people think that vibe coding is just all about like close your eyes, let AI send it, and just like don't even try to learn the code at all. I think that's very misguided. Like when I learned vibe coding since last year, sure, I didn't really know how to read all of code from day one, but you can use AI to teach yourself, right? I eventually will learn, route files are often used to define how you use an API with any service, right? Okay, these are the types of files that you have Gemini prompts, and you can see the system prompt there, and you can understand using AI how the information flows from that file into perhaps the chat feature on your website where the AI prompts are being fed. You should and you can learn all this stuff by utilizing AI as a co-pilot to teach you. So yes, there are going to be people that are going to use these tools and create stuff that's not great, but there's also going to be people that use it to create something that's great as well. So it's like saying like paintbrushes and canvases are bad because there's some shitty artist that can create something that looks bad. Sure, you could use that argument, but you can also create good artwork as well. And I think it's a net positive if thousands and thousands of people who are motivated by the right intentions, determined and want to learn iteratively, like if they're building apps, that's good for the world. So that's my perspective. I mean, I think a lot of reactions negatively to vibe coding are usually coming from people who are trying to gatekeep it because their own identity as an engineer is being challenged. Like, how do you feel if like all of a sudden what you spent 15 years feeling like elite about, you can build all this stuff, right? Somebody can come in with no experience and just do it. So I think it's more of a cope than anything.
Interestingly, most of these comments, from what I see, came from highly technical engineers. right?
Yeah. It's a gatekeeping thing.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and they bash it without fully understanding the context, right? Like, I'll give an example. Like, I wrote this post on Twitter. The peak is vibe coded, right? A lot of it is using AI assisted coding. Right?
I saw some comments.
They're like, oh, like financial info, like, oh, you like security is so important for financial. I was like, you think we don't test our code? Like, I was like, you think just because you use AI, you don't like, make sure privacy and encryption policies are in place. I'm like, that's what I mean by straw man. It's like people are trying to pull out like the worst case scenario and then bashing it. And they only do that when they feel challenged, right? When they feel like, oh, I don't want to invite these people in these spaces. It's the same way like celebrities feel about like influencers, right? Because all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, you can, you're someone from TikTok and now you're trying to be a singer, like that's you're not like, you don't come from this record label or whatever. It's like, well, sorry, if they have an audience, they have an audience, right? It doesn't matter. So it's just people gatekeeping. That's my perspective. And if you're worried about your job because you think a bunch of vibe coders are challenging it, then you need to up-level your own skills. I mean, that's your own problem in my mind.
It's just crazy. I mean, I see myself as an engineer, and I see a lot of other of my friends who are engineers. We are using a lot of AI to make ourselves more productive nowadays. Which is cool.
Like you guys are using it, right? Like
I'm using continue.dev. Like I'm not using Cursor, continue.dev open source one, which is pretty cool for me as well.
Yeah.
I think before we end, because I think we are almost to the end, right? But I just want to learn more about yourself. Maybe second last one is you're technically running 2 startups now, Peak and Code with AI. Right, and you are also a DJ part-time, and you are a poker player, and you're also a high rocks athlete. Like, tell me, how do you even stay focused, keep hustling, and without burning out yourself with so many other commitments?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah. Well, I would say anything fitness related should be something that you do anyways, right? Okay. So I like to just do things with a higher level of intensity. So if I feel like you should exercise anyways multiple times a week, you might as well do it with an activity that has a community surrounded or a community attached to it. For the other stuff, I mean, it's time management. I would say that day to day, my biggest focus is still building Peak. It's the most time consuming. It's the one that requires the most thinking around how to extract the most value out of existing AI models. It takes the most amount of thinking on the acquisition side. So for the others, I would say Code with AI. It's very, I would say, weekend by weekend based. So we run courses twice a month on the weekends max. And then we do perhaps 1 to 2 external talks. And that's pretty much all me and Agrim have time for, who I'm running the courses with. We're both startup founders, right? So we can't run this like a general assembly and do, a bunch of stuff every single day. So we limit it, right? But we make sure that, okay, what we're doing within that time is still valuable, because if 100 people or hundreds of people per month can get exposure and get inspired to do something here, then that's impact and that's meaningful. For the other stuff like hobbies, I think it's once a month kind of frequency that I have. I mean, I don't like do every week poker, every week music. So I time box it, right, where I can, because these hobbies are not ones that you can do casually. Like, even if you have to prepare for a set, it's like sitting down for hours, finding music and figuring out how to mix it.
It takes skills. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just figure out how much time I have for each, and I slot it. Of course, Peak is still number 1. And then I only pick activities that give me energy. Like I do these things because I love it, right? If it's out of obligation, then it drains my energy, and I wouldn't want to do it. And I just feel super busy.
So prioritize the time time management, and then basically just do what you love.
Yeah, do what you love and figure out what's the amount that you can engage that is within the time that you can allocate, as well as the time that you can engage that gives you energy. Because if you did something too not frequently, then you're not really getting a frequent enough exposure and value out of it either. So it's all resource management in a way.
Yeah.
Like where do you allocate your time to make yourself effective and happy from the things that you do?
Got it. Last one. For aspiring founder listening right now, maybe who are people who want to build B2C ad for themselves, what is one piece of advice you would give to them before they start? Or maybe one trap to avoid?
Well, I think the first one I was going to think of is apply to an accelerator that gives you money pre-product, or find a side income so you have time to figure things out. Because
why not getting paid from day one?
You can as well, but it's B2C. It's B2C. So my honest take is this: like, unless you're building prosumer, or it's like Figma, or someone's almost thinking near professionally, like, you want volume, right? And in order to get volume, I mean, you may not necessarily want a paid product from day one, or one that's like super high in pricing. And even so, even if you price a subscription product or whatever, you might be making like $10, $20 a month max. If you don't have that many users right away, it might not be able to pay for you. Like, you might not be able to pay for yourself. So I just say this because it allows you the emotional freedom to feel like you have time to work on it. Because I think the problem I see with a lot of founders is they kind of quit too early because they time to figure it out, and oftentimes the cushion, and oftentimes the money piece that does start to worry people. Like, I think if I were to start over and do another business, I would find a way to monetize still on the side something, right? Maybe I vibe code an app for people. It's like a services business. You know, you spend an hour vibe coding something and you get paid like 2-3K. You do like a few of those a month, and you have a way to pay the bills while getting to work on your $1 billion idea.
Love it.
This is how I would do it, just because you want to give yourself time to figure things out. And if you don't have enough cushion, then you may be forced to giving up before you've given yourself enough time.
So the one trap to avoid is don't quit your job too early before you have some.
Yeah, I mean, if your job is chill, and you can coast and get away with it, yeah, build on the side. I think I didn't do that because, I mean, it was a different time. I think when we started companies, you could raise money with a deck and a dream. That's not the reality anymore.
Yes. Yeah. So where do people find you online if they want to, follow up with you, or maybe partner if you want anything?
Yeah, they can follow me on LinkedIn, Sherry Jiang, or they can follow me on Twitter, Sherry Yan Jiang.
Cool. And how can our listeners be useful to you?
Well, I'm always happy to hear about how they try vibe coding. What are some of the challenges? We always use that to figure out how to better our curriculum. I mean, if you have money problems you want to complain about too, I mean, happy to share with me. I can't say that Peak works for people that are outside the US yet, so I don't think I have a solution yet. But if you want to vent about how much you hate managing your money, eventually that might translate into something you can use in Asia a couple years later.
So the apps now are only for the US?
Correct.
Users. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think thanks so much for sharing, Sherry. Super amazing to hear your story from building Peak and then now Code with AI. Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. See you again.